Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How about you?
Crazy busy day,
Uh,
but it's all good.
Tell me about it.
The end of the milestone. I guess it's for everyone like this right now.
Yep. How many days are remaining? 3.
Too few.
Hi everyone, let's wait for a few more seconds. Okay, so it's 2 minutes past the hour. I think we can uh, go ahead and start. I have the first item in the agenda. And the first one is, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. The first one is about a spike issue. And, um, and I want to present the problem, I want to present the proposal and get your thoughts either right now or on the issue. Uh, so basically today, if you're familiar with our Log Explorer, you can filter today by 2 parameters. There is a drop-down where you can select the environment and the pod to see the logs from that pod. Now, the thing is that if we have this drop-down for the environment, we are actually limiting our capability to surface all the logs that Elasticsearch is collecting for us, because Elasticsearch actually collects the logs from the entire cluster. So from the deployed application, from Kubernetes, and from the managed apps. For instance, HA proxy or the Nginx. Now, the thing is that when I filter by environment is actually a namespace. So I'm limiting myself to that specific environment, which makes sense at the time when we develop this feature, because as a developer, I want to see only the list of logs from my environment, and I should not see, and maybe I should not allow to see even logs from other environments, because Elasticsearch is deployed to a cluster. So there should be some separation between different users. As a developer, I should not see logs application of projects that I'm not involved with. Now, the thing is that, as I mentioned, we do want to surface the other logs that we are collecting. And the question is, how are we going to do that? So there have been two proposals. Okay, the first one is by Adrian, is to create another log explorer, a second version of the log explorer, basically the same one, but this log explorer will be placed on the admin area underneath the cluster, the Kubernetes cluster, as you see here. like to add some sort of a tab here for logs. And when you click on this one, you'll see only the logs for the cluster or for the managed apps. So you probably will have like different filters, and only specific users will be able to see it, because not everyone are allowed to go into admin. So if I'm a developer, I'll not be able to see those logs. I'll be limited. When I look at the log explorer, I'll see only the logs that are relevant to my project. And if I'm a maintainer or administrator, then I can go to this second flavor of the log explorer, and I can see those logs. So the pros, as I mentioned, is that there is a clear separation between the logs that I'm getting from my application and the logs from the managed app. And the cons is, first of all, at least what I'm thinking of is that we'll have like two log explorer in the same solution, which is not ideal and can be very confusing. And for instance, as a customer, if I'm administrator and I have an access, which log explorer should I go in order to see my application? And now when you see my managed log, I need to go to a different log explorer. Also about the flow, we have a triage flow where we go from an incident to the log explorer. And what happened there? Should I have like two different flows? If I'm getting incident on my Nginx, should I go to the second log explorer? I mean, how do you do this separation? And also, I think that the cost of maintenance might be high. We may end up building features just for a specific flavor of the log explorer, and it will be very hard to make sure we will reuse the same code. The second proposal is to use the same log explorer. So we'll have only one log explorer. But if I'm navigating to the log explorer and I'm not a developer, I'm an administrator or a maintainer for that example, I will see a different flavor of the log explorer, meaning I'll have additional drop downs. So I won't be limited to the environment. Instead of environment, I'll see namespace. And then I can go from the logs of the application, and I can change the namespace to the GitLab managed apps or different namespace, and then I can see all the logs. The advantage here is obviously we're using a single log explorer, so there is no confusion and there is a single user flow. And the problem here that I see is we'll have two personas. Both of them will see a different flavor of the UI of the log explorer. So those are the two options that we have, and there is like some discussion here between Adrian and Nadia, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and maybe add your comments either in the issue or if you have any comments to add to the discussion right now. I'll be more than happy to hear those.
My personal opinion would be I'll be more inclined towards having a single view of the logs, because it makes sense for an admin to be able to see more logs than, or more namespaces than a regular user of a single project.
Thanks.
Yeah. I agree. I also think the option to keep all logs in one interface makes more sense for the workflow that we're solving for. And I don't see a lot of problem with having different permission levels to information within the logs. I think it makes sense, and I don't think it would come as a surprise to someone with, let's say, developer access, that they don't have access to those types of logs that the maintainer would have access to. So I think it seems like a much better solution.
Thanks. But I mean, feel free to add your comments to the thread even after this discussion. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. Clement, you have the next one. Clement is here.
Yeah, sorry, it was a little late. Yeah, I want to go over some of the things that we've made clear for what expectations for Spike in the team. So if you get a chance, please take a look at the handbook as well as the MR link that kind of talks about how we're trying to be more explicit with kind of what we want outcomes of spikes to be, expectations, so that we make sure that after doing a spike that we're best set up for success for working on the feature. So please take a look at that. And then the other thing is we noticed that the demo hour hasn't really have had much usage from the team. We want to iterate on it. Originally, it was created when the teams were formed, when Monitor was separated into APM and Health, as a way to kind of see what other people are working on. But over the recent months, it looks like the agenda hasn't had anything, so no one's really been participating. So we still want to see if we can foster that original vision for that meeting. But we're thinking about changing some things, and the health team has proposed and created that issue. So I want to broadcast it to the APM team to see if there's feedback here that we can provide, because we'd like to take action sooner rather than later. So please take a look at that issue and comment. Back to you, Dov.
Yeah, thanks, Clement. Earlier this week, I had a one-on-one session with Andrew. Andrew is one of the, I think he's a manager, the distinct engineer from
Distinguished
the SRE team.
engineer.
Distinguished
Yeah.
engineer from the SRE team. He's also the DRI for the dog fooding metric project that we are embarking. And I had an interesting conversation with him as he walked me through the entire features that he's using on Grafana. So there is a video and also some sort of a requirements doc that he created. So as most of you, if not all of you, are involved in some way in the dog fooding metrics project, I would highly recommend all of you to view this video. It's almost 1 hour video of him going through all the feature and the required document. It has like very interesting anecdotes and things that he's using that we sometimes may overlook and don't really think about those details around timestamp, around the variables that we are working on, around drill downs, and more. So I encourage all of you to go through that. And yeah, I think it will provide a lot of clarity about where we are heading. Obviously, the dog fooding metric is a project that we will continue to focus on in the coming iteration. So yeah. Ruben, you have...
So, yeah, I was watching the first part of the video, and he mentioned the timestamps in UTC as an option that GitLab SREs at least will find very useful. So I just wanted to mention that it's missing in the docs.
Right. Yeah, we actually have an issue for that for 13, but yeah, we should definitely
And
add this just in case.
Yeah, it's a feature of Grafana, not of the metrics dashboard.
yeah, I mean, our metrics dashboard doesn't support it currently. It only shows local timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another thing was I just reached the part of the video where he talks about the dollar interval, min step, and resolution. And that part, that functionality of Grafana is quite difficult to understand. So when we need to replicate that, we probably need to understand it better.
I think, yeah, Clement mentioned that we probably need a separate session for that. I agree. Yeah, we can set up more time with Andrew and ask him specifically to discuss or elaborate on this. But I think we have quite a lot of issues that we can take on regardless. So it should not, I don't think it's something that should hold us back. But yeah, I agree. If we think that we need more clarity, we can definitely reach out. Okay. Jose, you wanna verbalize your comment about the resolution?
Oh yes, it's something that Clement and I figured out while trying to understand how Grafana changes the look of the graph, and they do use the same things that we use from the Prometheus API, which is the minimum step and start and end times, but they also have this weird parameter called resolution, which apparently what they do is they tie pixels from your screen to points in time, and according to the resolution is the amount of data that is displayed, but that also causes Grafana to somehow add more points that do not exist when you do the query in Thanos or Prometheus. It's kind of weird.
They are filling the gaps.
Yeah, they fill the gaps, but like gaps in the past, not in the future, which is even more weird because if you go to the past, they should have the data.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, but I guess this is when you change the resolution. So maybe I need to think about it.
We all need to think about it because it's an interesting feature, that's for sure.
Yeah. Like they are not doing like a reverse query on history. It's like anyway, that's.
Is it interpolation? Are they like interpolating points on the graph?
Seems to be that way. Cindy from the SRE team, Clement, were researching that, and they figured out that when doing the query, we grabbed the JSON data from like our setup, like we exported all the data from our setup. We did a standard Prometheus query through Thanos to get the same data points just to make sure we didn't miss anything. And they actually exported the Grafana data, and we figured out that the Grafana data is interpolating 2 points in the past that somehow they do not exist in Prometheus with those values. But if you consult the query points from that point in the past, the values are completely different. And I don't know why they do this.
I don't know if that's specific to this part though. That could have been something else.
Yeah.
That sounds dangerous. I mean, points that don't exist in the data source, and you're actually showing them on the viewing layer. It sounds weird.
Yeah, there's also an issue with Thanos and Prometheus too, with data reporting incorrectly. So, yeah, there's lots of different challenges.
Okay, Ruben, you have the next agenda item.
Okay, so there was an issue in 12.10 for determining what format we want to allow for defining templating variables in our dashboard YAML files. So this is just the conclusion that we came to. I just wanted to bring it here in case anyone has any input. So if everyone can see that image there, that has two different kinds of variables. One is a simple custom type where you can define every single possible value that the variable can hold. So that will be shown on the UI as a drop down, and the user can select the value for his variable, for that variable. The other type is a free text variable. You can see there's a type text there. So that one will allow the user to type any text that he wants as a value for that variable. But the most useful type of variable that the SREs speak about is one where you can put a Prometheus query, and the values for the variable will be all the different label values. So if you scroll down, there's a second iteration. So in that, you can see a type metric label values, metric underscore label underscore values. So this one corresponds to the Grafana feature that is kind of like a pseudo function. It's called label underscore values. So it works similar to that. You provide a query and you provide a label name. So the query will be executed, and all the different values of the label that you provided will be the um, uh, options in the drop down for that variable. So that's just a simple overview. If anyone has any suggestions or any comments about this, go ahead.
I think it makes sense. I'm looking at the issue. Can you maybe promote it to an epic and break down those issues so we can schedule them to the coming iteration, because we want to start working on them on version 13?
Yeah, sure. I think there's already an existing epic. Should I promote that to an epic?
If there, yeah, there is an existing epic, just like open the relevant issues. Like implement the custom type variable, the text, and the dynamic values. I guess they all should live like in a separate issue. And so, because I assume it is broken down by like an MVC, so I don't know how exactly, but I guess we are not going to take like all of those types into the first iteration. We're going to break them into
right,
uh,
yeah.
like issues, and when we are doing that, do we also update the URL, or do we need a separate issue for that?
I think that should be part of when the front end work is being done, to add the drop downs. So when a user selects the value in the drop down, it should update the URL. It can be part of that issue.
Okay. Okay. So
I think
I guess we need to.
be careful how we want to refine this, so we can better scope what first iteration MVC looks like. Because I think one of the conversations is maybe even not having drop downs for the first MVC, so that it's only passed through the URL, which I think is a good first step. Like we don't like, so for an example, one of the dashboards we have in Grafana is the marquee customer, where you pass in the Salesforce ID of the customer to pull the dashboard for those customers. And they only pass it through URL. So this could be a good way for us to get a smaller first product iteration, but also still be able to use it for our own dog fooding.
Yeah. So we actually already support passing variables to the backend through the URL. So you can currently add variables to the URL, and if they are defined, they'll be used.
And do we know, Clement, if in this dashboard they are like hiding the variable, or they are just using like a customer ID?
Oh, for the marquee one?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think there's a drop down with all of them.
No, there's no drop down, but the variable is like the customer ID equal the ID itself. The question is it the actual variable, or the variable is actually a customer name and they are like hiding it from the URL in some way?
It's in the URL. So like you say like customer ID equals 123, and then that passes into the query.
Okay.
But then again, we talk about how in this proposal, we're not passing those variables. Oh, I don't know if we're passing that variables until iteration 2. So maybe that doesn't work either. But I think Dov and I should work on what the scope should be first before we break down the issues and determine where it should go. That way it's clear from the product side what the expectation should be rather than kind of what the technical implementation should be, if that makes sense.
Okay, I mean, we can talk about it, but I'm in favor of your proposal about, at least for the first iteration, passing the variable to the URL only and not with the dropdown. And after that, we can implement the front end using the dropdown. And if we need further breaking it, then maybe maybe have a separate issue for each type of variable. The question is about, this is the question about implementation. How easy it is to implement in case we'll break it down this way, or will it be easier to take like all those parameters together, all those types of parameters?
It will be easier to implement each type of parameter separately.
Each type? Okay, so.
But even if we have like two different issues for meaning one different issue for each type, you can schedule like multiple types in one iteration as well.
Yeah, of course. Iteration in terms of like a single version, yes, we can do that, but let's break it down to smaller pieces. And yeah, I can write a description there, but I'll need you all to create the technical implementation for front end and back end.
Yeah, I think the idea is to break the product iteration to smaller pieces, not necessarily saying that we only add like one type for each release, but it's scoped independently, so we don't end up in this weird situation where we ship nothing at all, but rather ship multiple types in one release. So just want to make sure we're all on the same page there. So from a technical standpoint, are there any trade-offs of this implementation or maybe alternative implementations we should consider or have been considered? Just to make sure we're considering all the aspects of it.
So for the first iteration, it's pretty simple. I don't think there are any alternate methods of doing it. For the second iteration, we had to choose some way of having dynamic queries that populate the variable dropdowns. So for that, I chose the Grafana method that seems to be most used by the SREs, which is the label underscore values. So we could consider other possibilities there if this is not the most useful second iteration. So there's a link in the last comment. If you open that, you can see all the different ways that Grafana allows you to define dynamic queries. So one question I had was, if you see the second iteration with the type metric label values, there's a key over there called dynamic underscore values, which seems like a very weird name. So if anyone has a better suggestion for that name, please, you can add a comment to the doc.
Where is, can you point me to that? I'm looking at this iteration 2 in the issue.
Do you mind sharing your screen? I think that might help a little bit.
So you have this image here, or you can also go to the issue. So I was talking about this key. dynamic values. So for this method of defining a dynamic query, you need to provide a query and you need to provide a label name, so that all the possible values for this label will be what populates the uh, will be the choices for that variable. So this key name seems very weird. So if anyone has a better suggestion, feel free to comment on the issue or the doc.
Why do you think it's weird?
It doesn't seem to provide much information on what the keys within this key, the nested keys, what they do.
I realize we don't have to make a decision today, but is there a reason why we can't just use the word value?
Value, I'm not sure if it's already used for something.
Are we able to, check whether value is that kind of type versus like an object kind of type?
Yeah, I think that should be possible.
But it is a dynamic value. I mean, it's based on the query and based on what we are pulling from Prometheus. We can have, depend on the value, it can vary, it can change. So I guess this is why it's called dynamic value.
One thing I want to add, because I noticed that these dynamic values are different from the naming that we are using for the other types of variables, like we're using options for the type custom, and it may be a good idea to have this unified. So having really different keys for the similar concept could be really confusing for the end users. So for example, having options and dynamic values, I think I may be confused if I would be trying to learn new syntax. So that's just a suggestion from my side.
Are you suggesting that this should be called options as well?
Most likely your options should be changed to something which encapsulate either dynamics values and the static providers, user provided values.
Okay.
I like this proposal actually, and because why separating those two? It's just another flavor. Like we have custom, we have different types of variable. This is just another type. You're just adding a query instead of putting a variable or a name. So I think it should be unified. I like this proposal.
Okay. I'll think about a name which can be used for both. The other thing I wanted to show was the different ways that Grafana allows you to define dynamic variables. So that second iteration is similar to this method. We can also choose to do implement any of these other methods as well. But Andrew also spoke about this label values pseudo function in the video. So I think this is the most useful method.
Probably, but maybe it's best we will also. I mean, we are doing a customer validation research, so it will be a good point of it. I mean, first of all, yes, I agree that this is something that we definitely need to implement. About the other types, maybe this is something that me and Nadia can do during the user research that we are doing on Grafana users.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So another thought is, since we're talking about CI, like a YAML definition, I think it might be a good idea to consult people from the CI team, since the CI YAML is the most popular YAML definition we have at GitLab, just to see if we're making the best decisions for how to organize these keys.
Is there someone in particular I can ping on the issue? Or do you mean like the Slack group?
You can ping their EM and see. I was just gonna search the org chart. I don't have anyone specific in mind right now. I mean, I don't know how to say his name properly. Grajegors might be a good person. He's been here for a while.
Okay. Yeah, I'll ping them on the issue directly so that they can, see the proposal.
Cool. Sounds great.
So that was the last item on the agenda. Anyone else has anything else to add? We are coming up to the end of this milestone. Any concern that you want to raise? Any thoughts? Guess not. Okay, so thanks for joining, and talk to you later. Bye.